Hello and welcome to the Carers Place. I'm Cassie and today we've got Carol Buchanan here from Move On Counselling. How you going, Carol?
I'm great, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolute pleasure. So Carol is really here to talk to us a little bit about what she does and how she works with people, particularly those affected by trauma. Just a little bit of background. So Carol is actually a nurse and she specifically has worked with people with chronic disease issues. She's also a counsellor and she does clinical hypnotherapy and trauma hypnotherapy as well. So Carol, did you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your practice? Because I understand that you work online as well as within clinics in Blackwood and also Mount Barker. Is that right? Yep.
Yes,
so,
that's right.
Yeah, so if you give us a little bit more on your background and then we'll get into the trauma side of things.
Yeah, so, I've always been fascinated with people's behaviour, because often what people talk about what they want to do and what they end up doing are usually two different things. So I work with people with long-term health conditions and worked in hospitals with people with alcoholism and all sorts of things, and can see that people were really self-destructive and would want to change the behaviour but couldn't. So it always left me really fascinated as to why we do this, and even why I do this. So we say we want to lose weight, but then we go and eat the wrong things or do different things. So I always find that really interesting. And so doing my counselling, realised that there are a lot of people have a lot of deep stuff, and we just go around in circles. So all this talking just made things that we didn't really get anywhere. It either made things worse or it didn't resolve it in the long term. It's just a short term, make them feel better, but it never really sorted anything out. So then I got into hypnotherapy. And again, it was the same thing. We were doing some hypnotherapy would be fantastic for people with some issues that were just generally wanting to have a bit of motivation. But people who had bigger, deep-seated issues, it could actually make them worse, make them panic. And I think it was that fear of digging something up that they've been all their life suppressing. So that led me to doing hypnotherapy for trauma. So that's really what I specialise in. I sort of say that I do the other things, but really that's my passion, because I know there's so much trauma out there. There's so many people that are in so much pain, and most mental health conditions come from a place of pain, and that's an unconscious way of coping. So I just feel like that is the place where I want to be. So that's what my focus is the trauma hypnotherapy.
Beautiful. So like Carol said, she helps people both in her clinic, but she can also do work with you online. So if you're not here in South Australia and really like to chat with Carol, we'll give you the details at the end, and we'll put them in the post as well, as far as how you can book a time to chat with Carol and see if you guys really can connect and work with each other to work through some of perhaps your own trauma, or maybe it's somebody that you care for. So Carol, let's get started with, what is trauma? I mean, we might have some sort of an idea or a notion in our head about what trauma is, but from your perspective, how would you classify trauma?
Well, trauma, some people might say, oh, I haven't got any trauma, but then when we speak to them, they've actually got lots of trauma, but they don't recognise it as that. So it's anything where you've been overwhelmed and you've not been able to cope at that time. So for some people, it's big stuff. Often the stuff that happens in childhood is what stays with us throughout our life. So even just being born can be a trauma, because our nerves are wired to keep us safe. So if we come into the world quite traumatic, that's actually like a memory that stays within our nervous system. So you may find that you've always been a bit anxious or a bit nervous, but you know that you were born premature or there was some major problem when you were born. So that can be a trauma. Giving birth. I know it's actually a National Birth Trauma Week this week. And there's many women that have really difficult births, and they've really suffered. Some of them have full-blown post-traumatic stress after having a difficult, very terrifying time of actually giving birth, or being in an accident. being in a car crash, just something, a hospital, having an anaesthetic that didn't work properly, or just being in a situation where you're really overpowered.
So even particularly for, the people who are watching at the moment, through diagnoses or, particular incidents that might happen in a hospital or in a medical setting, or
absolutely.
Where maybe somebody's been mistreated perhaps by a carer or what have you, anything that has happened, like you said, where your power's been taken away. And
Definitely. And it is really that, is that often in those situations, we're turning to these people for support, but we're actually very disempowered in that situation. So these people then don't treat us in the way that we should be treated. And we really not always have the opportunity to do anything about it. And that feeling of being completely overwhelmed at that time can stay with us for a very long time. The anger, the guilt, because we should have, we talk, oh, I should have done this and I should have done that, but often we don't have that opportunity. So being in that, so, and it may not be you, it may have been your child or somebody else, but also, things that happened in early childhood. So being neglected, being abused. A lot of people I work with have had sexual abuse as a child. So that even those really big issues are definitely things that we can actually work through. So people think that all this trauma is something that you just have to live with because it's part of who you are, but that's not the truth. So, things like being neglected, living in poverty, all sorts of really difficult circumstances. I've certainly worked with a lot of people who've had abuse from both parents. So even things like somebody's choked on food or got stuck in a lift and they end up with a phobia. That is trauma. There's so many incidents.
To be something that's perceived as major, like a major accident, for it to be trauma, is essentially what you're saying. So how does it then show up in our lives? Because I expect it can be very different for different people.
Absolutely, yes. I think when you're struggling with nearly anything in life, most things, it comes back to some sort of thing that's happened in the past. But typical an example, anxiety and depression. So a lot of people think that I'm anxious and that's just the way I am. But often there is something in the past that's done that. Either you've learnt it, you've decided that the world's not safe. So that's what anxiety is. I don't feel safe. So anxiety is a big one, and it's a big problem. Depression. So depression is a way of squashing down feelings. It's too painful. You squash down the emotions, and therefore you squash down all your emotions. You become flat. So those are the typical examples. But it may come up as an addiction. So somebody may be using smoking or alcohol as a way of managing and using it as a comfort blanket.
Or food.
Shopping, porn. Gambling, all of these things. And I've certainly worked with people with porn addictions and with alcoholism. So that's quite common. The other physical things, irritable bowel syndrome, because if your body is on high alert, as we know, when there's a difficult experience and you're frightened, then your body sends all your energy to your muscles and diverts it away from your gut. So having reflux, so that can be a sign. That can be a sign as well. Just nervous tension, nervous energy in your body. You could have migraines. Chronic pain. Certainly worked with a lady recently who'd had lots and lots of terrible things that happened over her life. And she just started with really bad back pain. And everybody's treating a back pain, but we didn't even do anything in hypnotherapy with pain. We just got rid of a trauma and a pain went. So we hold that tension and that pain in our bodies as well.
So everything you're talking about is really highlighting the correlation between mind and body, right? They are intrinsically linked.
Absolutely.
And I'm a big believer in that, and a big believer in dealing with, you know, when we're looking at any ailments or anything that's going on, rather than treating the symptoms with a band-aid. We actually need to get down to the root cause.
Yes.
So, you know, some people might look at that and they might see, you know, a counsellor or a social worker or a psychologist, and they're very, very afraid of going through that process and bringing everything up and going over what has happened over and over again, which is kind of a typical way that people might start to, you know, work with those professionals. So what are the dangers and pitfalls of us doing that and reliving our stories?
Well, the problem is that we often can keep rewiring those memories and that into our mind, so that what happens is, you know, the neurons that fire together wire together. So basically what we practice is what we become. It's like practicing a violin. We keep going over that every day, then that actually builds up neurons in our brain. It becomes like a superhighway. So your just mind goes there automatically and actually embeds that, and it just keeps you reliving it. It's like Groundhog Day.
So you're re-traumatizing over and over and over again.
Yeah, because basically what happens when you have a trauma is that the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's responsible for fight, flight, or freeze, that's releasing chemicals that then affect the rest of your body into shutdown mode. So that your gut shuts down. It shuts down your thinking part of the brain, and it shuts down your memory. That's why we end up doing silly things when we're stressed. We start putting the drink in the, you know, your milk in the cupboard and your keys in the fridge. So it basically shuts down the part of the brain that's responsible for storing memories. So that memory of the event cannot be stored properly as a proper memory. So what happens is, it ends up going round in your body, in your unconscious mind. It's like a stuck record. It's like it's happening now.
Playing on repeat all the time.
Yeah, all the time. And that's why we get anxiety, is because it doesn't feel safe. And obviously, if your body still thinks there's an event going on, you're not going to feel safe. But the other thing to it, I'd say the other thing to it is that if you think of full-blown post-traumatic stress, it's exactly what it is. It's happening now. It's happening now. And you have flashbacks, you have nightmares.
Yeah.
But with anxiety, I think of anxiety as being very similar to post-traumatic stress. It's just not popping into your conscious mind. So all of these things,
unconscious or your subconscious,
yeah,
in the background, So I'm assuming then that this isn't what you do. You don't make people necessarily relive their trauma. How do you work with trauma clients, Carol, that perhaps differentiates between what people might have experienced in the past or how they might think it actually works?
Yeah, so a lot of people think with hypnotherapy, and there may be some hypnotherapists that actually do getting you to relive it as a way of processing it, but that just re-traumatizes people. If you spent your whole life trying to avoid facing your trauma because it's painful, then you certainly don't want to relive it. So what we do is to actually, well, first of all, you need to write down your homework. So that's just dot points. It really would be like, at age 15, you were raped. At age 18, you're in an accident. And that's it. We don't want full details.
Basically.
Yeah, just a timeline. That's right.
Bang, bang, bang.
And then you write down where you are now. What do you want to move from? So you want to move away from drinking, being dependent on alcohol. You want to work away from overreacting, because that's one of the things that often people do. It's like pressing a button. So when people say, "Oh, you're pressing my buttons," they know that makes me really angry. That's basically saying there's something in my past you've reminded me of that's hurt me. So that overreacting is a typical symptom of an unresolved issue. So we write down all those things that you want to move away from, and then what you want to move to. So we know it's like driving a car. You've got the sat nav on, you're sitting there in the car, well, that's okay. We know we don't want to be here, but where do we want to be? So you've got to dream a little. You've got to be, what do you want to be like? So you might want to say, well, I'd like to just have a drink of alcohol and stop instead of binging. I'd like to feel calm and confident. I'd like to be able to go out without getting worried about what people are going to say or think of me. Because often, you know, there's a lot of self-doubt and negative self-belief when you're having difficult life experiences. Because one thing we haven't talked about here is that is looking at our unconscious core beliefs. So that's the first start part of the process, which I think we'll probably leave to another day. But we want to change those negative self-beliefs that are running around that are actually causing you distress. And those can be things, you know, I'm not safe, I don't deserve to be loved, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, all them things. But we can talk about how those come about and how we deal with it on another day. But we need to change all of that. So that's the first part of the process. So we do a lot of education. We do a hypnotherapy session. So it's not just pure hypnotherapy. It is lots of education. It's a full process. That's right. So
you're not going to come in and walk into you, and in a session they're all of a sudden going to be fixed and walk out, and everything's going to be, you know, sunshine and lollipops. So there's work.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
You need to be ready for that.
Yeah, need to be completely and utterly ready, and also need to think about what is keeping you here and now, because sometimes it can be a benefit of being in pain. It might be somebody who's been extra caring for you. It might be a carer payment, or some funding in some way, an insurance or something that's you think, well, if I were well, I wouldn't be entitled to that, so a loss of money. Therefore, you end up sabotaging because you'll lose that. So
quite often fear is something where, you know, essentially our body or our mind is trying to keep us safe, you know.
Absolutely. That's the unconscious mind completely.
Exactly. So
yes,
sorry, go
on. No, it's good. So then we look at the next part of the process will be letting your body know and your unconscious mind that these events in your life are over. So we do that by setting up certain scenes and certain ways. I'm obviously not going to tell you exactly how we do it, because you might go away and play with it, and that would be a good idea.
And it could be dangerous too.
Yes. So once your body knows that event is over, everything comes right back to calm, and it's very powerful and quick. Those huge changes really happen in a massive way, and so it's really quite unique. Because it's done by not reprocessing the actual trauma itself. It's actually done in a very, very safe way.
Reframing it, almost.
It's probably not even a reframe, really. It's probably hard to describe without actually telling you what we do. But it's because you're coming from a re-empowered. So the first part is about empowerment. So if you're coming back to the trauma in an empowered way, then that changes everything. Often we come back to the trauma.
Of what you were saying, as you know, your power being taken away. It's essentially being given back.
So the thing is with traditional hypnotherapy or traditional ways of counselling, is you're trying to deal with trauma when you're still disempowered.
Yes. Okay.
So you still keep going into that place of all those unconscious core beliefs are still there, driving your behaviour, and then you're sort of trying to deal with it on a conscious level, but the trauma's unconscious, and you're also dealing with it from a place of disempowerment. So you're never going to get there by dealing with trauma on a conscious level by just talking it through.
So you're talking about really setting some foundations before you even go to that next level of working through that and coming out the other side of it. You're setting extremely solid foundations, you set up a framework, and then you move forward. It's a complete process. You couldn't just do the middle bit and not do the first bit. You really have to do the whole thing. So there's lots of education about there. There's lots of education about what is empowerment, because sometimes people think they're empowered and they've addressed something, but they're actually coming from a victim stance.
You know, they think that I've stood up and I'm angry and I've done this, that, and the other, but it's still coming from a place of disempowerment.
Yeah.
So that really needs to be in place, and that's essential before you can actually do the next step. So yeah.
So if somebody comes and works with you, Carol, is there sort of a time frame? I'm assuming everyone's different, but I guess you'd have sort of a minimum amount of times that you would see somebody before you start moving forward with their healing. You know, so obviously someone can't just come and see you once or twice and...
Well, they really need to do the whole process. So it's called the Richards Trauma Process, and you can look at that up online, but it's basically 3 to 4 sessions. And you have to do the whole thing as a package. You can't just do a part of it. So they have to sign up for the package, and they have to commit to doing the whole thing. And I think the healing starts from the minute you walk through the door, because we can actually really start changing some of them unconscious core beliefs. And some people walk out of session 1 going, oh my God, I just feel amazing. This is incredible. Some people just walk out and go, yeah, that was okay, that was fine, nothing changes, but you come back after session 2. And so we do a depression, anxiety and stress score, and then we've also got the from and the to list. So we're able to really assess on an objective level to see actually what the changes have been. So like I had a lady the other day who was, she had complex post-traumatic stress, and I don't like labels, as you know, I've had this conversation, but I think she had extreme trauma and stress and distress. So we can call it complex, but yeah, she's just got a hell of a lot of pain.
Yes.
From a lot of different angles, and that's what makes it complex. And I don't know whether they call somebody complex because they can't sort it out. But when you tell somebody complex, it keeps them stuck.
Yeah.
But it keeps them stuck, doesn't it? If I tell you you're really complex, it's like saying, well, nobody can heal me, and I've got this forever. So that's why I don't like. We hold on to that, don't we? I've got this, and I'm so complex. You can't possibly do this for me, because did you know that I'm complex? And you know, people hold on to those labels, and sometimes
almost
that does keep them
in
there.
some respects, but you know, and they
can be
definitely talk about Matthew like that in the hospital, but at the end of the day, he's still Matthew, or you're still you.
Yes,
know, without anything else, still you. So if people are thinking about working with you, Carol, but they've got some questions, do they have the opportunity to have a chat with you beforehand to see if this is
absolutely, yeah. I always have at least a half an hour chat with everybody, because one, I want to make sure that they're really ready for this. I don't take people on unless I think they're ready, because that just fails me and it fails them. So you know, we have a really good chat about where they're at, and so they understand what they're committing themselves to. So I always do that, and that's free.
Beautiful, thank you. So how can people get in contact with you? What's the best way? Is it through your website or through an email? What's the process?
Usually through my website, but I can put my telephone number down on the website. They can just give me a call.
So what's your web address? What's your web address?
It's moveoncounselling.com.au, and I can put that in the...
Awesome.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we stop the recording? And like you said, we'll do another session where we talk about a bit more about core beliefs, because that's a conversation in itself.
Yes.
So is there anything else that you wanted to say or add before we wrap up the recording?
I suppose that a couple of things that going back a few steps that I didn't miss, that I missed, is one is the big thing is that insomnia. So insomnia is one of the big things. If people don't sleep when your body's on guard and it's still looking out for danger, because it's not safe to go to sleep. So if you've got insomnia, and that's often a big thing.
Absolutely huge. And if you're not sleeping, you simply cannot function properly.
No.
And yes, not at all.
Yeah. And I suppose the other thing that I didn't really talk about was that real overreacting. I think that pressing your buttons, So if your kids are playing up and they're going, you know, often we end up repeating behaviour that our parents did, and we don't want to. We actually want to be a different parent. But sometimes that's really difficult when you've come from a place of trauma. Because one, you may not have had the childhood that you would have wanted. So you haven't got those role models. And you're really doing the best that you can. And you're always trying on a conscious level. But you know that you explode more than you should do, or you don't cope. And it's just because if we look at being at calm, and then we look up here is fight, flight, or freeze.
Yes.
If something upsets you, you come up and then you come back down. But for often people, they're already up here, and they're so on close to fight, flight, or freeze that it's only just one little thing added on that sends them up into full blown panic, and that is a real big thing, because they're just living in fight, flight, or freeze all the time.
Yeah, which I would say a fair percentage of the people in our carers community are doing. They're just running on empty. Really, and constantly in, you know, running on empty. They really are, and that's where we see a lot of burnout. And people who have, you know, severe mental health challenges because being in that state for such a long time. And then we have adrenal fatigue, and then it affects us, you know, physically with chronic disease starts showing up, and we get our own health conditions because of being in that state. So very, very good point. So whilst you know, I guess we're looking at the mental health, you're really focusing holistically on the entire
it's the whole
which is beautiful, which I love.
And I do just see a lot of mental health, and this is the thing about labels, and I think about labels more around the area of mental health rather than autism and all the other types of disabilities and areas and learning delays and things that there are, and processing issues, is that there is a real overlap between trauma and between how people present. So often they'll say, you know, the person's got autism, but there's a lot of trauma in the past. So I've seen people diagnosed, and it's not to say that they don't have autism, but if there's it's an added layer. It's an added layer, and they may not be suitable for my services depending on their function, their ability to be thing. But if you think of your own energy, if somebody's quite anxious and they're running, then that energy is in the house. You're a pebble in the pond in that environment.
Absolutely.
And if you're running up there, the whole house is, because everybody's going to be jumpy and nervy. So that if you're thinking, I don't deserve this, I don't need to do this, I need to focus on the kids. What you do for yourself, you're doing for your kids, because once you're at calm, your kids will be different as well. They'll sleep better. They will be more calmer, you'll be calmer, and the whole house settles down. So.
And I'm absolutely a walking example of that. You know, you probably don't know, but years and years ago, I ended up extraordinarily sick myself through stress and, you know, you're not, I'm just going to mute on there. And, you know, had essentially ended up in hospital myself. And didn't look after myself, thought I had to do everything. I was a single mum, had the two kids, and Matthew, you know, had autism and cystic fibrosis, and then had his brain injury, and I was very, very sick. And I ended up pulling myself out of that, and over time, as I got better, my kids got better too, as far as, you know, they were more engaged, they were happier, they were more well adjusted, etc., etc. But as far as if you were to look at, say, Matthew right now, and he is in, you know, he does have autism, but he's in a heightened state right now. He's got extreme social anxiety and, you know, depressive kind of behaviours. And if you think over the last 2 years, he's being traumatised over and over again, not to mention everything in the past with his own health. No wonder he's in the state he is. And, you know, you introduce a new drug that is full of hope and promise, and he starts feeling better physically, and then all of a sudden everything else starts to snowball as well. So I absolutely agree, and think there's a lot in, you know, that trauma adding layers onto what's already, you know, tough diagnoses. So
definitely,
agree. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Carol. So again,
that's my pleasure.
If you're watching and you're interested in having a chat to Carol, she insists on having a, you know, at least 30-minute conversation with you to make sure that the process that she uses is right for you, and that you understand that process and that you're ready for that. You can contact her via her website at moveoncounselling.com.au. And yeah, if you've got any questions when we put this into the Facebook group, by all means, pop some questions in there. But otherwise, like I said, contact her through her website, and I'm sure she'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. All right, thank you so much. And to all of those who tried to join us in the Facebook group, I sincerely apologise. Thank you for joining us, Yvonne, and we will catch you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Cassie. Bye.
Bye.